There's something we've all experienced, in ourselves or in those close to us. When someone starts being intentional with their time, choosing where they invest energy rather than repeating old habits, people around them notice. It's subtle at first, but it often makes others uncomfortable. Why? Because when you shift your priorities, the way people are used to relying on you no longer works the same. In this video, we're breaking down why even small changes in your behavior create noticeable reactions from others, what those reactions actually mean beneath the surface, and why choosing yourself, despite the discomfort it creates, is not selfish, but necessary if your life is going to move in a direction that is truly yours. Welcome to the Glitch Cult, where we don't accept behavior at face value. We break it down to understand the patterns underneath, because until you see why people react the way they do, you'll keep mistaking your growth for something that needs to be corrected. At some point, without any major announcement or visible shift, you begin to take your life a little more seriously. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no clear starting point, but gradually, your attention begins to move away from things that simply fill time and towards something that feels more important, even if you cannot fully explain it yet. You start thinking about how your time is being used. You begin to notice how often your day gets decided before you even make a choice. Conversations, plans, small commitments, repeated habits. These things start to take up space in a way that you hadn't questioned earlier. And for the first time, instead of just going along with it, you pause. Not because something is wrong, but because something begins to feel incomplete. That incompleteness is important. It doesn't come from outside pressure. It comes from a realization that if you continue living the same way, nothing meaningful will change. The days will pass, the routines will repeat, and you will remain in a cycle that feels normal but does not move you anywhere specific. And once you see that clearly, even briefly, it becomes difficult to ignore. So you begin to make small changes. You don't stop everything. You don't cut people off, but you start becoming more deliberate. You reduce how often you agree without thinking. You become selective about where your time goes. You start giving focused attention to something that matters to you, even if it creates pressure in your mind. That pressure is not comfortable, but it feels purposeful. And this is where the external shift begins. The people around you start noticing that you are not as available as before. You are not as quick to respond. You are not as involved in the same conversations. You're not showing up in the same way. And while these changes make sense to you, because you know what you're trying to build or move towards, they do not carry the same clarity for others. From their perspective, something has changed without explanation. The version of you they were used to, someone who would engage, adjust, and be consistently present, is no longer appearing in the same way. And because they do not see the internal process you're going through, they try to understand the change based on what is visible. So the reactions begin. It may come in the form of casual comments. You've changed. You don't show up like before. You can relax a bit. It's not that serious. These are not always said with negative intent. In many cases, there are attempts to bring things back to what felt normal earlier. Because from their side, the earlier version of you made interactions easier, more predictable, and more comfortable. There is also a gap in understanding. The thing you are prioritizing, whether it is a goal, a skill, or a direction you want a life to take, is something that exists clearly in your mind, but not in theirs. They do not feel the pressure you feel. They do not carry the same sense of urgency. So when they look at your reduced availability or your change in behavior, it does not connect to a meaningful reason. It simply looks like distance. And that is where the discomfort builds. You're not trying to withdraw from people. You're trying to move towards something. But to them, what is visible is only the withdrawal. The movement is internal. The effort is internal. The reason is internal. And because of that, your change is interpreted based on what they can see, not what you are working towards. At the same time, your own experience begins to change as well. The things that once felt enjoyable without effort, casual plans, long conversations, unstructured time, start to feel different. Not because they have lost all value, but because your attention is now divided. Even when you're present, there's a part of your mind that is thinking about what you're trying to build, how far you are from it, and what needs to be done next. This creates a quiet distance, even without intention. You may still meet people, you may still engage, but the involvement is not the same. And this difference, even if small, is noticeable. Over time, it becomes consistent. And once it becomes consistent, it becomes your new way of operating. And that is the point where others fully recognize that something has changed. Not because you told them, but because they can no longer experience you like the way they used to anymore. Once this shift begins, it does not stay limited to how others react. It starts changing how you see your own life. Because when you begin to prioritize something that matters to you, you also begin to see clearly how your time was being used before. Earlier, saying yes was easy. It required no thought. It kept things smooth. It avoided unnecessary conversation or conflict. But now, each time you say yes without thinking, you are aware of what you are giving up in that moment. Not in a dramatic way, but in a very direct sense. You're choosing one thing over another. And that awareness changes how you make decisions. You begin to notice that your time is limited in a practical way, not as an abstract idea, but in terms of how many hours you actually have in a day and how easily those hours get consumed. If you do not decide where your time goes, it gets used by whatever comes in front of you. And most of those things do not contribute to the direction you're trying to move towards. So prioritizing yourself becomes less about preference and more about structure. You're not avoiding people. You're assigning time differently. You're not disconnecting from life. You're choosing what part of life you want to build. And this choice requires consistency because occasional effort does not produce visible change. The thing you are working towards, whatever it is, needs repeated attention. It needs time that is protected, not left over. This is where the difficulty becomes real. Because every time you protect that time, you are also refusing something else. And that refusal is visible. People notice it. Situations change because of it. Some interactions become less frequent. Some relationships adjust. Some expectations no longer get fulfilled in the same way. And you are aware of all of this while it's happening. You understand that your choices are creating this shift. You understand that some people may not fully agree with it. And there are moments where it would be easier to go back to how things were, where you didn't have to think this much, where your time was not structured, where everything felt lighter. But there is also something you cannot ignore. If you go back, nothing changes. The same patterns repeat. The same use of time continues. The same lack of direction remains. And you already know what that looks like because you have lived it. There is no uncertainty in that path. It leads to a life where things continue, but nothing moves forward in a meaningful way. So even when it feels difficult, you continue. Not because it feels good every day, but because it makes sense. Because for the first time, your decisions are connected to something you actually want to build, not just something that keeps things stable. Because even though progress is slow and not always visible, you know that repetition in the right direction will eventually produce a result. And that clarity changes your relationship with discomfort. It is no longer something to avoid at all costs. It becomes part of the process you have chosen. The pressure you feel, the distance you notice, the changes in how people respond. These are no longer signs that something's wrong. They are signs that something is different. And that difference is the point. Because for the first time, your life is not being shaped by what comes to you. It is being shaped by what you choose to give your time to. And once you reach that point of understanding, going back is no longer a neutral option. It becomes a conscious decision to remain where you already know you don't want to stay.